as here we go. Feel free to, like, as we go, I'll try and look at it. But if I miss your question for some reason, I will remind me at the end and I will get to it. But I'm thinking that this, if it's, a tame enough crowd, which it seems like it is, we can do a bit of a um back and forth question and answer kind of thing. So, yeah, with that, I'm gonna get started. So, stitching for sanity, needlepoint as a mental health tool in tumultuous times. I have had this on my mind a lot. I last year I did a class that was all about spiritual stitching, and I did that as an in-person class in my community at a local store here. And it was a really small group, but it was wonderful to just share my thoughts on the combination between stitching and spiritual practice and mental health and how all those things kind of tie together. So I figured now is probably a really good time to share my thoughts and also my research into this with you guys in this format. Um, it just felt like the appropriate time, okay? So, um, let's see. We've got a lot going on right now. All of you have pretty much mentioned TikTok as a source of stress. Um, this is, for a lot of us, a time of great upheaval and uncertainty and stress about what is to come. And this is not going to be the only time of uncertainty that we experience in our lives. This is probably not even the first time that we have experienced some sort of uncertainty in our lives, but it's definitely not going to be the last. So, what I want to share with you guys is techniques and strategies for how we can use our needlepoint or our art and our creativity to support ourselves in these times of uncertainty and stress. So who am I? You're like, who is this girl? Why does she feel like she can give us a webinar? Um, I'm Stephanie, and I, of course, have Spellbound Stitchery. I have a degree from App State University. I love horses. And you probably know me just from needlepoint world, but there's so much more as a full, well-rounded, fleshed out human being too. But you guys probably get to know a lot of me and what's inside of me through my artwork. And so I think this is just a good opportunity to get to know like kind of what's behind all of that. So my art is informed a lot by my education, but then also by what I like to call my mysticism. And I use that word mystic and mysticism to describe like the really unique combination of my spiritual, my artistic, and my self-care practice. I think that all of those things um, are integrated into one another. They're not separate things, like they all work together and behave together and they're all like united. So as you guys have probably noticed from the types of art that I create, I really love to study folklore, symbols, lots of world traditions, rituals, and I'm really, really interested and fascinated by like the mysteries of life. And so what I have to share with you guys is very much open, and I'm not here to like I feel like I said spirituality and I don't want to scare you guys into thinking that like this is a like religious thing. It's definitely not. This is open to everybody. I don't feel like it's very religious at all. But I find that sometimes spiritual practice and self-care practice are like I can't really tell the difference between the two. And so like I feel like this is very secular um like secular spiritual practice, I guess what I would call it. But it's very much techniques and practices that we can incorporate into our daily lives to just make ourselves feel better. And I have gotten interested into this and really studied this and dug really, really deep into all of these things because my life has been filled with a lot of upheaval. When I was homeless or when I was a teenager, like 17, 17, 18 years old, I experienced a time of homelessness and separation from my family, and that was very stressful and traumatic. And I've also experienced multiple like sexual assaults that again were extremely traumatic. And so I struggled for a few years with like pretty severe PTSD. And so the things that I know about coping with stress, and I'm like blushing because I don't ever talk about this stuff, but the things that I know about coping with stress and healing from trauma was learned through practice and through coming through it and incorporating all of the stuff into my life, rather than a theoretical practice. So I don't have like a license to practice therapy or anything like that, but I do have a lot of experience under my belt dealing with trauma and recovery and healing and integrating all of those things within myself, if that makes sense. So we're all here because we needlepoint and we like needlepoint. And I have seen how needlepoint is used as a self-care tool for myself. And I've personally like reaped the benefits of using needlepoint in my self-care and in my spiritual practice. So what I'm going to share with you guys tonight is very general advice and general insight, but I'm happy to do like another one of these if you guys are interested or curious, where we can dig deeper into little individual topics if you're interested or curious. So let's talk really quick about the nervous system. I have here a giant nerve. But our bodies, of course, are made of nerves and hormones and physiological processes. It's all integrated with our brains, all the way down our spinal cords into our bodies. And if you're anxious or nervous, you may feel it within your body. You may feel like a tightness in your chest or a tightness in your throat or a tightness in your gut, or like the back, your shoulders may feel tight. Like it's all integrated into our body. And stressful experiences and events can cause your body to have a physiological reaction, even if you're not like consciously aware that it's happening. And it takes a good bit of practice and mindfulness to know like if something is happening within your body. Um, I hope you guys have all heard, you know, of the terms fight or flight or um, fight, flight, freeze. These are our body's natural responses to traumatic or stressful events. And when doctors talk about stress having a negative effect on your body, they're talking about your body's nervous system, like all those nerves within us, flooding our bodies with hormones and cortisol and causing those physiological changes. So our nervous systems were built to help us run away from tigers or fight off feral raccoons. Our bodies were not built to really read distressing headlines or scroll on TikTok or worry about our bank account. 10,000 years ago, human beings did not have bank accounts. When our bodies were evolved 200,000 years ago, um, our bodies did not evolve to deal with screens. Our bodies did not evolve to deal with the news cycle. Our bodies did not evolve to deal with the stresses of today. Our bodies evolved to deal with being in a like hunter-gatherer society. And that is so, so far removed from what we're dealing with today. So we have to like actually take proactive steps to take care of our bodies, because our bodies literally cannot feel the difference between the stress of a tiger chasing us and reading an alarming headline. Okay, does that make sense? Are you guys with me? Um, so it's really important though that we do manage our stress, because the longer our bodies stay stressed out and the longer that we deal with like chronic ongoing stress and exposure to that cortisol and those hormones in our bodies, it can really disrupt our body's processes. And so this puts us at higher risks of a lot of different health problems, including anxiety and depression. Digestive issues, headaches, muscle tension, heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, sleep problems, weight gain, problems with memory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list goes on and on and on. How stress, like over time, the cumulative effects of stress can really affect our bodies. Like for me personally, the personal like things that I go through when I get stressed out is I really struggle with depression and anxiety. And and I think I'm pretty sure that that has a lot to do with just like the stress load that I was under when I was going through like everything that I was going through like early on in my life. But that really manifests itself even today, all these years later. So it's really hard for me to relax and be present sometimes when I'm stressed out, even when I'm with people that I want to like spend time with and that I care about. It's hard for me to really be present. I notice sometimes when I'm stressed that there's like a lack of interest in the activities that I really love that are really healthy for me, like exercise and art and cooking and gardening, those things that I really enjoy. And I also notice when I get stressed that I tend towards feeling pessimistic or angry or hopeless. And so all those things kind of accumulate and turn into a feedback loop, making me feel worse and worse and worse. That's just kind of what I have experienced. Um, so what happens to my creativity when I'm stressed? Also, let me see. Okay, here we go. I'm back on track here. So what happens to my creativity when I'm stressed? Um, One of two things happens with my creativity when I'm stressed. The first thing is I completely freeze and shut down, and I melt into a puddle of depression and hopelessness, and I have to fight my way out of it, and I can't create anything, and like nothing seems like it's working in terms of like my creative process. Or here's the other thing that happens. And I think that the first thing is falls under the freeze category, right? Where I just shut down and I can't do anything. So that I freeze. But the second thing that I do create like my creativity response to stress is that I feel like I have to fight. And it manifests through my creativity in really interesting ways. Like I feel the need to use my creativity to make a design that speaks out against something that I'm upset about, whatever that may be. Um, so I'll show you some examples of how that has happened. And also I'm going to talk a little bit more in just a minute about how to work with your creativity. But here's like some of the things you probably are familiar with these designs, some of the designs that I have created in times of stress, right? So the freedom canvas, stress about reproductive rights, right? Like my favorite season of The Fall of the Patriarchy. Very stressed about women's issues, very stressed about like current events. Season of the Witch, I think, goes together with Fall of the Patriarchy, because I think that those two things just go hand in hand, like clinging on to like just and like fighting back against the notion that like women have to be shoved aside, that women who speak out are witches and need to be villainized. Like, no, we're taking that back. Okay, where am I? The Chimney Rock canvas, when Hurricane Helene was happening, a lot of my stress and fear was channeled into I have to do something. I don't know what it is, but I have to do something. And so that's where this collection came from. The only one it's dark enough, can you see the stars? That I if you guys know the where that quote came from, that came about. That quote is from Kamala Harris's concession speech. And I cried and cried making that canvas, right? Like I cried and cried, and I think a lot of people have also like really, really resonated with that, and they have loved that. And then over here, the anatomy designs here. Um, Stress about like healthcare. My dad a couple years ago had to have his kidney removed, and I just remember how stressful and how painful and scary that experience was for me as his daughter, not being able to be around him and support him. It was like kind of during COVID when he had to have that surgery. And so I just felt like it was really important to bring these designs to Needlepoint because I couldn't be the only person who was like stressing and feeling some kind of way about um healthcare. So how can we channel some stress for good? And actually, I'm gonna sit here on this before I talk about it. I've got these pictures here of soldiers from World War One and World War Two stitching to recover from shell shock and PTSD. So I'm bringing stitching back into it eventually, but for now I'm going to like talk a little bit about channeling our stress for good. So, what I have found, and you guys feel free to chime in the chat if you have any thoughts or any input on this, but I find that when I am feeling the type of stress that makes me feel really active, like doing anything, anything, taking action of any kind helps to channel that stress and redirect it. Like the last thing that you want to do is just sit on it, right? So like I think we can make a list even of like what are some things that we can do when we're feeling stressed. Sometimes stitching is the right thing to do when we're stressed, right? But sometimes there are other things that need to get done before we can stitch. Like during Hurricane Helene, I had no inclination to stitch whatsoever. I was just like my stress wanted to do anything else. So, what I like to do is I like to just make a list of the things that make me feel better when I'm stressed. So, whether that is talking to someone, taking a walk, spending time with my animals, or writing an angry little note to my representatives, um, journaling, breathing exercises, things like that. You guys probably have a list of your own of things that make you feel better, whether it's like video games or like talking to your partner, calling your mom, things like that. But the last thing you want to do is just sit on your stress and just pretend like it's gonna go away on its own. Because those prolonged major stress events can cause more problems or lead to panic attacks or just continue to deteriorate one's health. So if you start to feel yourself getting really anxious and worked up, it is important, I think, to address that. The other thing I mentioned earlier that when I'm stressed, my thoughts tend to start to go like to really dark places. And so I urge you all to remember to like keep track of your thoughts and your feelings. And when you feel yourself start to going down or start to go down kind of a darker path or feel like anger or sadness or hopelessness or whatever that may be, to honor those feelings, like you're not going to deny them. You're not going to say like, "Oh, there's no reason for me to be sad." Like, no, like you can say like, okay, yes, the sadness is it means something. You can honor that. You can honor that sadness and say like that very valid for me to be sad right now. But remind yourself too at the same time that those feelings of sadness or fear are not the only feelings and that they're not the only possibilities. Um there's hope, there's joy, there's love, there's peace. So we can acknowledge the truth and the negative emotions, but but also don't dwell on them or sink farther down into them. Redirect yourself if possible towards an action that you can take that's in your control that we went over in the list just a minute ago and try not to dwell too much on the things that you can't control. And that's really, really hard when we have like the 24-hour news cycle and when we have TikTok to scroll on, doom scrolling. It's really, really hard sometimes to just let go of the things that we have no control over. But sometimes for ourselves and for our stress, like just like refocusing and shifting our attention to something else is the best thing that we can do for ourselves and for our bodies. Okay, so I'm back to these pictures now. So stitching for stress management. The repetitive movements of stitching have been shown to reduce cortisol levels and lower blood pressure. It's like we like stitching already, but like it is literally scientifically shown to help people. Um, I can feel personally, and you guys feel free to share in the chat too if you experience this, but I feel like an immediate release and relaxation of my vagus nerve, which is like the nerve that goes through your chest right here, when I sit and stitch for about 5 minutes. So when I feel that my nervous system is really, really activated, if I can remind myself, like, hey, just go stitch for a second, then I can feel my body just start to like sink back down, get into a really nice, relaxed, calm state. Um, so it's really, really lovely to know that like we already have a hobby that helps us deal with stress in this way. Um, the flow state that we can get into as well with stitching, it allows for a meditative like experience. And for me, that's super helpful because I don't like sitting still and truly meditating, like meditating. I don't like doing that for 20, 30 minutes at a time. I can't quite sit still, but I can sit and stitch for 20, 30, 40, 100 minutes at a time. I can do that. And so you're additionally, and in addition to getting into your flow state, slowing down the release of cortisol, relaxing your vagus nerve, all of those things, stitching also helps your reward centers in your brain with a hit of dopamine while you're stitching because you are doing something that you can see as you stitch. You can see things being completed, and so it just is very, very satisfying and rewarding. So that's stitching for stress management. And I just love these pictures. My partner, as you guys may know, he's a history teacher and he had never seen these pictures before. He did not know that needlepoint and stitching and knitting and all these things were used for soldiers healing, both from physical wounds and mental and emotional wounds during World War I and World War II. So I'm just going to talk about this very briefly, but I think it's important to point out that that stitching is also used in like spiritual and religious settings too. Stitching for prayers, stitching for your intentions, stitching for manifestation. If you are ever, which you probably don't want to go to Washington, D.C. now, but if you are ever in Washington, D.C. and have a chance to go to the National Cathedral, there's literally thousands and thousands of needle-pointed pieces in the cathedral. The cathedral has kneelers and cushions for every single seat in the place, and they're all needle pointed by hand. And I just think I think that's wonderful. I think that's fascinating. And I think that's a lesson too for us, not only for stress management, but also if you have a spiritual practice that you want to incorporate into your creative practice, you can. And I definitely encourage that. And I think that's a very powerful spiritual tool if it is something that you are into. You do not have to be into it. I'm not saying you have to be into it one way or another. I just think it's really cool and I love it. And that's something that like if we want to talk about this at another session, I'd love to dig into it deeper if anybody's interested, but I just think this is really, really interesting to point out. Okay, so next, stitching for protest. I think now, again, you may feel like really hopeless and want to do something, and I just wanted to point out these already existing projects and protests that have been done with fiber art. I think that it's fascinating that there is already a word, craftivism, for activism and crafting. It's combined the two things. And so this could be like another means of finding control, finding something that you can control, finding a way to channel your stress or your anxiety or your fears into something that's tangible, but also that is saying something. This is a really great article. by Eon, Aeon, called Threads of Resistance. Definitely check that out if you have a chance. But I wanted to show you guys some examples. I don't Crude Canvases is not I don't think she's painting canvases on Etsy anymore, but she is still on Instagram and she has these needlepoint designs that are endlessly inspiring to me. This one, Abort the Court, um, love. And then I don't need sex. The government F's me every day. Obsessed. And then these needlepoint is not the only fiber art that is being used in craftivism or is being used in like making a statement. I think art has always been used to kind of push back against things, but there's quilting. If you can create it and you can think it, you can use it as a form of protest using your art and your creativity. So Jessica here with her Women's March quilt, the community quilters at the Social Justice Sewing Academy created this. And then this needlepoint piece, the School Zone, is just incredible, and that's by Kevin Lustig on Instagram. I put his little handle there so that you can see his work, but he designed that piece and stitched it, and I just, I don't know, that is just like the most chilling, beautiful, like the technique of it is incredible. The exposed canvas to look like the gunshot. I mean, it's incredible. Okay, so we've talked about how we can stitch for stress management, we can stitch for prayers, and we can stitch for protest. So I'm gonna move on to my last two topics, nurturing your creativity and then also nurturing your sensitivity. So here for nurturing your creativity, I have the muses. These are like the Greek muses here. Um, I love the thought of having muses that kind of whisper in your ear little ideas and give you ideas for your art. I just think that is so cool. And I think as a professional artist who uses I use my creativity every day, I do kind of have to treat my creativity as a separate being because that separation leads to a greater degree of tenderness and care towards my creativity. I have found that I must not overwork my creativity. I must not expect too much out of it. I can't work it too hard. The creativity needs time to rest and to restore. Um, my creativity also needs to be fed. I call it feeding my creativity, and I do this by going to museums, going to concerts. I try and consume as much art as I create, right? Like it's like breathing in and out, like consuming the inspiration, watching other artists do their thing and just being lit up by it. I think it's so amazing. Um, and if I don't consume as much art as I create, I can feel like myself getting drained. And I think that's really interesting and something to keep in mind, especially during this time too, like creating art, consuming art. It should all be a part of like nourishing ourselves. And then also like I listen to my creativity. If my creativity insists that I design something, I'm going to design it. I don't care if I don't think that it's commercially viable. Commercial viability plays no role whatsoever in whether or not I decide to design something or create something. I listen to my creativity and I give it whatever it wants. Um, it pays my bills, right? Like my creativity is the entire reason why I have a livelihood, and so I really need to honor it and respect it and not like wear it out. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense, but I'm happy to clarify if you have any questions. And then lastly, nurturing your sensitivity. So here I put the daylily flowers. Daylilies only bloom for a day and then they wilt. So these flowers here only exist for a day and then they go away. Um, I was asked by someone the other day, like how I am able to maintain my sensitivity and maintain my tenderness and care and love with everything terrible that's going on in the world. And I do understand completely, like, the impulse to feel really jaded and cynical and hopeless, and cold, right? I think that that is a defense mechanism to protect that sensitive, soft, tender side of yourself. That's the way that we guard ourselves from being hurt. And I'm not I don't know that I really have very good advice for maintaining your sensitivity once it has been injured. It's like you almost have to like bring it back to life, I guess. But I will say that desensitizing yourself and like normalizing violence and normalizing hurt and normalizing hatred and normalizing anger, I don't think that that's the answer to maintaining your sensitivity and your care and your tenderness. Definitely protect yourself and protect your peace, and know that you don't have to consume every bit of bad news that's out there. I think that's a good first step. Walk towards your relationships with people and towards your communities, and do whatever you can to help people in need if you can. Remind yourself that just because something looks really bad and really scary, doesn't mean that that's how it is everywhere. Yes, it may be really bad and really scary today in this place, but tomorrow in another place, it may not be so bad and so scary. And as Mr. Rogers says, like, always look for the helpers. I think also remembering that your thoughts and your feelings, kind of using like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach almost, but like knowing that your thoughts and your feelings are just thoughts and feelings, and that um you can change your thoughts and your feelings can also change, although that's, I think, a little bit harder than changing your thoughts. Um, but remember to kind of look towards the positive things and redirect yourself if possible when things start to get hard, or when you feel like you are starting to close your sensitive side off. I think protecting your sensitivity and nurturing your sensitivity and your kindness and your caring and your openness and your tenderness is essential for um, stress relief and for creativity as well. So that is what I have for you guys. I just kind of want to close with my final thoughts here, that when I say that we are doing like a stitching practice, or that stitching is a part of my self-care practice, I do not mean that I have it all figured out, because I definitely don't. That doesn't mean that I am always happy and cheerful. I'm definitely not. This presentation I made for myself as much as for you guys, I think. Um, and anytime we're working with like a stress intervention or an intervention for trauma, like, it's not like a one and done deal. You can't just do it once and then you're fixed. Like, it's something that you kind of have to keep doing and keep repeating, and it's a bit of a drag and it's a bit of a grind. Stress is always going to come up. Hard times are always going to come up. Things in life are really difficult to control, as we know. And we're going to go through cycles of really good, and we're going to go through cycles of also really bad. And so maintaining like a consistent practice and taking care of our creativity and leaning into stitching and leaning into our relationships, into our families, and just having something to kind of like go back to when we're navigating those cycles and those ebbs and flows, we're going to be better equipped to handle stress and use those healthy coping strategies going forward. So, yeah, with that, I can open the floor up for some questions. If you have something you want to say or ask, feel free to unmute yourself and have at it. I see some things in the comments here or in the chat. Oh, awesome. Mel shared some resources with us in the chat. Someone said, V said, I have chronic pain and was just thinking last night how helpful it is to have a hobby that helps take my mind off the pain and get through it when I can't access adequate pain control, more so than other crafts I've done before. That's really awesome. All right, guys, I'll shut up and allow any questions if you have any.
Regarding the research that you used on like soldiers and stitching,
Mm-hmm.
are any like I kind of want to learn a little bit more about that if you have resources on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. I was thinking I'd do a version of this also in my Substack, like with links. So I can put that together if you're, yeah, I can do that. Because I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I had no idea that that existed until now. So that's really cool.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering what everyone is stitching.
Yes. Here, I'll turn off the slides. There we go. Here you go. Now we can just be normal.
Oh, is that your house?
No, it's the Home Alone house.
Uh,
I stitched over the Home Alone part on the bottom, but yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I said your house because my Aunt Cindy made her house for Christmas for like all the family members. She got it painted by someone and she made us all like an ornament. Anyways,
No, I would like to do my like childhood home eventually, but I haven't gotten there yet.
so cool.
Stephanie, thank you for being